Also, George, we have to point out, no matter who the shooter, what the shooter's motives were, no matter who the shooter is, you are going to hear conspiracy theories going forward.
No question about that. But as you point out, those statements from J.D. Vance and Vivek Ramaswamy, of course, President Trump and his supporters have contributed to this violent rhetoric.
Can I finish, Simone? Will you just shut up for a minute and let me finish?
Pardon me, sir. You don't get to tell me to shut up on national television.
We don't tell people to shut up on this show.
Remember, no matter how much you hate the media, it's not enough.
And he closes with God Bless America. And we saw him raise his hand in the air defiantly, blood on his face as he left the stage.
He is recovering from these injuries now. This was a traumatic event, no doubt, for him. But I did notice there was no call for lowering the temperature, condemning all political violence, and really trying to signal to his supporters as well not to retaliate or to have any kind of escalation here. I just am looking at these statements.
There's a belief in his inner circle that he's under siege after being attacked at his rally. And so there's a lot of every text message I'm getting.
Will exactly digest it like you're saying.
I mean, every single text message, literally every single one from Trump sources is outraged and shocked. And so that is certainly the mood inside the highest ranks of the Republican Party, speaking to CBS News tonight.
President Trump and his supporters have contributed to this violent rhetoric as well.
Well, absolutely, George. We were just looking back this morning at some of the things that former President Trump has said. He warned last March of potential death and destruction if he were charged by the Manhattan District Attorney. Our country is being destroyed as they tell us to be peaceful. Trump in January warned of bedlam in the country if the criminal charges against him succeeded. And of course, in March, he said, now, if I don't get elected, it's going to be a bloodbath for the whole. That's going to be the least of it. It's going to be a bloodbath for the country. That will be the least of it. He said he was partly joking and that was taken out of context. But those are indeed his words. And you have heard it from supporters as well. And supporters are certainly, in some parts, angry. And let's remember January 6th. In so many ways for the campaign, January 6th will probably be in the background after yesterday's event. This is a very difficult time for this campaign. I'm sure this week in Milwaukee that President Trump will highlight this, and President Biden is going to have to figure out how to go forward with this campaign and what exactly they say.
The rhetoric around him over the last few weeks, that if he wins an election, our country will end, our democracy will end, it's the last election we'll ever have. These things have consequences, okay? I don't know what the motivations of this shooter are. I don't know any of the details. But I know the rhetoric around Trump has grown extreme. You mentioned some other violence. You didn't mention the Supreme Court, attempted murder of a Supreme Court justice, or the congressional baseball game where Steve Scalise was nearly murdered. One a conservative, the other a Republican. But we have people in this country who are dedicated to telling half the country that if Donald Trump wins an election, the country will end, the Constitution will go away, and so on and so forth. What I want to hear from all elected officials is this kind of hyperbolic extremism has consequences and it must end. Yes, we're all shocked, and yes, political violence has no place. Where does it come from? It's got to stop.
But we're also hearing from Trump very, very strong statements of condemnation of Biden, the worst president, the most dangerous president, and all of that. He's speaking very, very strongly against President Biden.
Who's in the hospital?
Well, we do. This is an assassination.
Look, I agree with you.
You say calm things down. I agree. Both sides should calm things down. This
moment is, what other wake-up call could there be for everybody in this country right now? I am mortified. I mean, this will live on forever. These pictures we're seeing today will be in the history books of our children and our grandchildren. I mean, we're living through a historical moment, and we have to recognize it for what it is, and we have to change.
You have to cool the rhetoric on both sides.
We have to change.
Because it's really dangerous, and it foments what we've just seen over the past couple hours or so. And it's a really, really scary situation. You want to add a point, Dan?
No, you just said it, Wolf. Scott, your point is so well taken that the escalation of rhetoric is something that, if you just look back in history, it doesn't take a lot to dig and find that people take cues from not just leaders, but from people around them. And when violence happens, sometimes things are uncorked, and it is important for leaders across the board, as we are seeing today, to tamp things down.
And it should be noted, many of Trump's supporters on social media tonight extremely angry. It's not going to reflect all of the verbatims of what we're seeing on social media from some of the Republicans around Trump. But to be clear, this is still a politically charged moment as much as it is a crime investigation and a security moment. Many people already in this country very angry at the other side, not just on a partisan red versus blue level, but we cover it all the time here at CBS News. There's a visceral nature to the emotions that pour out on the campaign trail.
And to that point, Bob Costa, I was just texting with Robert O'Brien, the former national security advisor to Donald Trump, who sent out a statement saying we've got to take the political temperature down. He and Mike Lee, the senator, issued this jointly. We've got to take the political temperature down, as evidenced by what happened in Pennsylvania today. So two key Republican Trump supporters calling for the rhetoric, the political violence, the threats of it to be lowered. That is in stark contrast to the head of the Trump campaign, one of the top Trump campaign officials you were reading statements from earlier. We are also looking at social media posts from other Republicans who are quite angry. Everyone should be angry that this security failure happened, but in a way that will raise further concern of someone misinterpreting things and perhaps carrying out further political violence. Law enforcement will want to lower this temperature. And words matter right now very much.
Well, we're entering, though, a period of extreme political charge with the Republican National Convention.
I do want to say there was one thing that when I watched the tape, I found odd because of all of the heated rhetoric. And that is that after he was hit, former President Trump got up and said, fight, fight, fight. I think what we're hearing from people is that's not the message that we want to be sending right now. We want to tamp it down.
Yeah, I would just know one thing on this, to that point.
Now, if someone is shot with a bullet that pierces the upper part of your right ear, wouldn't that bullet also continue onto someone's skull and create a much more dangerous situation?
So that's a great question, Wolf. And you know, what the intent of a shooter with a rifle in an attempted assassination is to get that bullet to go into the head and across. What may have happened here is that either the way the former president turned or the angle that the shooter had on that shot, it may have just grazed the outside, piercing the skin and carrying on. What's going to be really interesting, and this is how we're going to know whether it was hit by a ricochet or a fragment or a graze wound, is what did they recover from that wound? Is there a piece of a metal jacket from a round that was fired that they have?
But you bring up a point I think we will all be talking about, and that is, of course, we don't know what the motivation was for this, but it certainly comes at a time that we are all keenly aware of the deep divisions and the risk of political violence. Is it something you even thought about as you set out to attend this rally tonight?
And then the biggest threat that officials are telling me tonight is in the form of retaliatory violence.
Sam, you're taking me to exactly what I've been underscoring and is frankly very concerning in the rhetoric we are seeing at this hour already. We are seeing some Republican lawmakers come out with statements directly drawing a line between the shooter, whose name we do not know. We do not know if he's a lone actor or was somebody else, but drawing some connection to the government. We have nothing to base that on at this hour.
At this hour, leading officials within the U.S. government still don't know what transpired. And it is frankly unpatriotic at this moment to be stoking the flames when we know that we are sitting on a cauldron of tensions. We know that tensions were already high before this incident, and the counterterrorism officials and Homeland Security officials that I've spoken to in the last few hours are deeply concerned that this event will be used as a rallying cry to launch attacks against individuals associated with the Biden campaign, campaign and lead to broader domestic distress. So right now, the goals are to investigate the incident, both the perpetrator and the security failures, as well as to try to tamp down any tensions that may arise coming out of it. Now, in this country, there is the First Amendment. And what we're seeing on Twitter, while it is First Amendment protected activity, I will say again, is unpatriotic in the sense that we know that this kind of rhetoric has a nexus to violence. We saw that on January 6th. We saw that in the attack against Nancy Pelosi's husband and multiple other instances.
John, you've been in close contact with the Trump family tonight. They gave you some of the first statements directly about Trump's condition, that he was receiving medical treatment, that he's doing okay, he's doing fine. And also, he claims that he was shot, that it was a bullet that grazed the top of his ear. What more are they telling you tonight?
Also, George, we have to point out, no matter who the shooter, what the shooter's motives were, no matter who the shooter is, you are going to hear conspiracy theories going forward.
No question about that. But as you point out, those statements from J.D. Vance and Vivek Ramaswamy, of course, President Trump and his supporters have contributed to this violent rhetoric as well.
Well, absolutely, George. We were just looking back this morning at some of the things that former President Trump has said. He warned last March of potential death and destruction if he were charged by the Manhattan District Attorney. Our country is being destroyed as they tell us to be peaceful. Trump in January warned of bedlam in the country if the criminal charges against him succeeded. And of course, in March, he said, now, if I don't get elected, it's going to be a bloodbath for the whole. That's going to be the least of it. It's going to be a bloodbath for the country. That will be the least of it. He said he was partly joking and that was taken out of context. But those are indeed his words. And you have heard it from supporters as well. And supporters are certainly in some parts angry. And let's remember January 6th. In so many ways for the campaign, January 6th will probably be in the background after yesterday's event. This is a very difficult time for this campaign. I'm sure this week in Milwaukee that President Trump will highlight this, and President Biden is going to have to figure out how to go forward with his campaign and what exactly they say.